Well, seeing that we have a quorum and the expected commissioners, and all of my timepieces say it's at least 7 p.m., I'd like to call this meeting of the Transportation Commission to order for Thursday, June 24th, 2001. Oh, and Mark Hurley is here too. Terrific. Mr. Freed, will you please call roll?
Commissioner Del Rosario.
Present.
Commissioner Graham.
Here.
Vice Chair Fong.
Present.
Chair McCroskey.
Right here.
And Commissioner Jamanillo Johnson.
Great. So our first item of business this evening is public comment. This is the time for public comment on items that are not otherwise on the agenda. And assuming we have a reasonable number of people, we'll set the time at 3 minutes each. I should note that we can't respond to these as commissioners if it's not on the agenda. Sometimes staff can provide resources. With that, who's admitting public? Great, Mr. Bond, if you would.
Okay, if any members of the public wish to address the commission at this time, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing anything yet. So it looks like we don't have any public comments, Mr. Chair.
Great. With that, we'll move right along to the presentation on monthly police data. Mr. Freed, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is presenting on collision information from the month of May. There was 1 pedestrian collision reported, 0 bicycle collisions, 15 vehicle collisions, 4 of which were considered injury collisions. 5 moving citations were issued, and 2 DUI arrests were made. And I was not able to get collision details this month, so that concludes my report.
Any commissioner questions on the presentation of data? Okay. With that, if the public has any questions or comments, we'll open it up to public comment, again, about 3 minutes, and use the raise hand feature if you're interested in commenting or asking questions about the police data.
And Chair McCroskey, I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Agreed. So we'll bring it back to the commission. Any comments from the commissioners? All right. Thank you for the data and the presentation. So I'd like to close item number 3, and I have to apologize. I need to go back to item number 2, public comment, because we received 3 letters of correspondence. One was thanking us for our discussion. One was about the intersection of Key Route and Santa Fe, which was responded to by staff offline in an email. And I think that was an adequate response. And then there was another item about a sidewalk.
I'll just note that that correspondence was passed along to the sidewalk repair program manager, and we'll follow up to make sure that they hear back.
Terrific. And yes, since the city runs a regular program, if community members have sidewalk issues, they should start with the Public Works sidewalk input feature, which can be found on the website. All right. With that, I'd like to move along to the consent calendar item on our agenda. There are 2 items on the consent calendar this time, and I'd like to ask if any of the commissioners want to pull either of these items for discussion. Okay, seeing none, if any member of the public wishes to discuss one of the items on our consent calendar, now's the time to raise your hand and make a public comment related to that. Seeing none, I will turn it over briefly to Mr. Freed to explain item number 4.1. And the
I was just,
corrections.
I was just going to note that the minutes reflect a change in the interpretation after the meeting for item 4-2, and that the recommendation for loading on Santa Fe carried with a 2 yes, 2 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstain vote.
Right, and I believe the important part was that once there's a quorum, it doesn't take all of those members to vote on an issue if there's a low number, but just a majority of that quorum for future reference. With that, I would entertain a motion for the entire consent calendar.
Motion to approve the consent calendar?
Del Rosario, thank you. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Graham. And
That's my cue. Commissioner Del Rosario,
Yes.
Commissioner Graham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fong,
Yes.
Chair McCroskey.
yes,
Motion carries.
okay, the consent calendar carries. That moves us along to item number 5, discussion and possible action. And our first item, 5.1, the proposed relocation of loading zone on Masonic Avenue at Solano Avenue. And I believe there's a staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item is regarding the loading zone relocation on Masonic Avenue at Solano. And as background, a 2-lane approach for Masonic at both Solano and Marin was approved as part of the ATP signage and striping plan. The southbound Masonic at Solano does not currently have the 2-lane approach, but the northbound at Solano and the north and southbound at Marin approaches do. These 3 approaches were striped in conjunction with earlier repaving. And I was just going to note that installing the ATP signage and striping plan configuration to match the other existing approaches would already require the removal of the curbside loading zone. And here's the northbound approach. You can see the red curb installed adjacent to the 2 travel lanes approaching the intersection. The Ohlone Greenway Trail intersection safety improvement project includes southbound Masonic Avenue protected left turns across the Greenway. The southbound will be a lagging left turn, and so it's important part of the design to include the turn pocket to maintain through movements. And the design includes approximately 90 feet for the left turn pocket and center line taper. Here's the current condition. There's an approximately 38-foot loading zone followed by a curb cut and single 90-minute limit parking space before the next driveway. That's if you allow the parked vehicle in front of the curb cut that doesn't really connect to a driveway. The proposal north of here is to utilize 1 existing 90-minute unmarked space and 1 green curb space for a shared loading and short-term parking zone, with short-term parking during peak preschool pickup and drop-off times of 8 to 9, 12 to 1, and 4 to 6, and loading zone hours of 9 to 12 and 1 to 4. This has the potential to add short-term parking capacity at peak preschool demand and loading zone capacity at other hours for greater use of the curb space. And this is directly north of the previous photo existing conditions. At the far left of the picture is the driveway behind the building on the corner. Other alternatives reviewed were on the east side of Masonic Avenue, where a 46-foot loading zone could be installed, leaving 1 4-hour parking space. On both sides of that are currently blue curb accessible parking spaces marked. On the east side of Evelyn, south of Solano, there could be 1 90-minute parking space followed by a 35-foot loading zone adjacent to where the commercial space on the corner does have a loading entrance. And it looked like there was in the past a loading zone at this location that was subsequently grayed out and then faded over time since then. So I don't know a whole lot about the history, but it looked like it had been in the past at some point. And then the west side of Key Route, south of Solano, is essentially would be a loading zone for the two spaces that currently are between the red zone and the driveway. And summarizing the pros and cons that led to the staff recommendation, the west side Masonic location is the most convenient for the existing users of the loading zone. It does have the potential complementary uses to improve efficiency of our curbside parking and park uses. The downside is it is further away from Solano Avenue where the commercial district is and potential conflict with preschool uses. And I summarized the pros and cons of the other. I can go into more detail if there are questions on those. With that, the staff recommendation is to install a shared loading yellow and green zone of approximately 35 feet on the west side of Masonic, 90 feet north of Solano in conjunction with the Ohlone Greenway Trail Intersection Safety Improvements Project. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Great. Let's start with commissioner questions. Commissioner Del Rosario.
Thanks. The use of the current loading zone, does it fit within the windows that staff is proposing for the flexible loading zone green zone? So is it 9 to 12 and 1 to 4 windows that the loading can occur?
It's currently marked as a full day loading, I think, the 7 a.m. to 6. I haven't done full day surveys or anything, but I have observed a fair bit of morning use. And when we discussed this, I think previously when we were looking at alternatives, the other identified user at the time, though I haven't seen it more recently, was UPS trucks in the later afternoon, early evening that several would park along there to transfer between trucks. But that was, yeah, I haven't seen it recently, and that was less of a direct loading to the commercial district than it seemed a relay point for them after serving the corridor.
And I know, as a follow-up, sorry, I know we heard from the gallery owner. Have we heard from Uri at all?
No, I spoke to one truck in terms of that was delivering there in terms of where they would prefer to come from if they couldn't come from the current location. I heard from the property owner of the building. And I mean, I spoke to the gallery owner earlier in the process when we were looking at the design alternatives for the signal. My understanding is the property owner received the letter. We do use a third party for our mailing list, and it may not have accurate occupant addresses, and the owner may not have passed it along to the commercial space occupants. But we did go through the normal notice procedure. But when I was doing the survey previously, when we were looking at design alternatives, I did speak to one person at Uri and left contact information, but they didn't have a lot of knowledge, being the person that was in the restaurant at the time, and I didn't hear back with the follow-up.
All right, thanks.
Commissioner Graham.
Do we currently have the combined yellow green anywhere else in the city, or is this something that's new?
This would be new.
Okay. And so it actually would be striped green and yellow curb and with the appropriate signage, I guess.
That's what I would propose, yeah.
Okay.
Any other commissioner questions? All right. With that, we'd like to open it up to public comment. Again, 3 minutes. Please use the raise your hand function. And we already have a couple.
Yes, Chris Kim, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm the owner of Uri. I actually, can you guys hear me? I'm not sure if I'm still muted or not.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I didn't know about this until a few days ago. We do quite a bit of loading and unloading in that area throughout the day. Mostly if it's just a 1 hour window between 12 and 1, I think we can manage that. But my support would go towards the loading zone being on the east side of Masonic, if those are the only options. Because a shared space would obviously, we would run into, I don't know if this would happen too often and how frequently, but I'm sure we would run into issues with that space. If it is just one space for the loading as well as for the preschool, we would definitely run into issues with that space being taken up at times when we do need to unload. And there's really no other areas around there that the vehicles would be able to park. My understanding was that there is another option here, and I didn't see that it was discussed, was putting a no left turn sign up there, which would definitely be my first option to be supportive of, if that's something that's going to be considered. Just seems like the easiest method of solving this problem here. And honestly, with the way that intersection's set up and all of the traffic that goes through that side of the road with the bike path, with all the bikes and the kids on roller skates and skateboards and whatnot, it just seems like that intersection is definitely an accident waiting to happen. So maybe just taking away the ability to do a left turn there. I go through that area all the time, and it really would not inconvenience me to not be able to do a left turn there. And honestly, I go through that intersection quite a bit. I don't necessarily see a whole lot of traffic there at any point. Maybe it's because of COVID these days, but I don't see how that would be too much of an inconvenience for the traffic to not be able to do a left turn there. But if that is not an option, definitely my support would be on the east side, where we would have our own loading area, and we would not have to share it with the preschool.
Thank you for your comments. Next.
Next, Alan Kane, please go ahead.
Hi there, Alan Kane, Solano Avenue Association. Mostly speaking for myself and some personal observations I have. This is not uncommon where we're given a situation where we really don't have enough time to interview people who are affected by this type of change. I think Chris just mentioned he only heard about this change a few days ago, or whatever the case is. But I just wanted to take a different perspective on the entire conversation. I don't consider myself a city hair shirt. I don't bother Jeff a lot. I don't bother the city a lot. I don't attend too many council meetings or traffic and safety committee meetings or transportation committee meetings. But I can tell you I've been to about a half a dozen in the last few years, and almost every single one of them involves parking. If it's not the elimination of a parking spot, it's the reassignment of a parking space. And I'm looking at today's agenda, and I know that there's some 90-minute parking on Marin that's being looked at as being converted to 20-minute parking, which, all of these 20-minute spaces are just going to make a 90-minute parker or a even longer term parker park deeper into the neighborhoods. And if that's the goal, that's fine. But I would just like to say that out of all the meetings that you have and all the projects that you have and all the future meetings and projects that you have, it would be nice for you to have something that maybe adds parking to the district. So elimination you've got down, reassignment you've got down, but maybe something that adds parking to the district. We just reassigned 35 parking spaces for outdoor dining. So there's obviously a parking, at least from my perspective, there's a parking problem in town. There's a traffic problem in town. There's a traffic management problem in town. So thank you for listening, and always maybe look at the options of adding parking, not necessarily elimination or reassignment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Hello?
Jennifer, you're next.
Great. And everyone can hear me, I take it?
Yes.
Yes? Wonderful. So I did want to just point out that the UPS trucks do utilize that space. So if you can keep it there, great. If you can, I'm with Chris, if, you know, even the opposite side works or something, maybe that works, but keeping it generally within that area. I do know that they utilize it, and they utilize it to service packages along our business route. A lot of those trucks there are for business packages. So please keep that in mind. You may want to contact UPS in regards to that. If that's going to be something that's affected, they may have some say in that as well, just requests or something. And I agree with Alan as well. We're constantly scooting along, taking a space here and taking a space there, and just it really starts to add up. And I'm hearing a lot of commotion from several, you know, friends of mine, community members of mine, that parking is getting to be a bigger and bigger issue. It's becoming much more congested, especially as things are reopening. And just want to try to keep that in everyone's mind front. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that's all the unique commenters. Is there anyone else who wants to make a public comment on this issue? It looks like Mr. Kim is interested in talking again, but has already had a chance. So I think we need to move on. Seeing, Mr. Bond, do you agree with me that there are no more unique commenters?
Yeah, you're correct, Chair Pekrosky.
Great. So with that, I'd like to bring it back to the commission and take commissioner comments and opinions. Who would like to get us started?
Well, just per the first comment that we had, I did want to give Justin the opportunity to clarify that I don't think it was just a loading zone of just 1 hour. That's what I heard the commenter say. And so I'll just clarify that I think it's 9 to 12. Or Justin, do you want to just correct me, or I can read it from the memo? But
Yeah, I think he was referring to the hour being blacked out from it being a loading zone, but
I see.
just
So
to be
that
clear,
being the hour, yes.
the loading zone hours and what was the staff recommendation was 9 to 12 and 1 to 4. And the short-term parking hours would be 8 to 9 in the morning, 12 to 1 p.m. and 4 to 6 p.m.
Okay, but thank you for clarifying what you heard. That's all I have right now.
Who else? Commissioner Fong.
A question, I guess. Was there also any consideration to having both sides of Masonic north of on Masonic as an option, or that was not really, it was just either one side or the other side?
So multiple loading zones could be considered. They would have, of course, more parking impact. I can go back to, since I guess I went through quickly, if you want me to detail the east side, option, east side of Masonic option a little more in depth, I can do that. That would be useful. Looks like a yes.
Great.
Here, let's bring it back up. So currently there's adjacent to the corner, there's an accessible parking space. There. Oh, now it's showing the wrong one. Can you guys see that, or is that? Let me bring that around. There we go. Currently adjacent to the corner, there's an accessible parking space closest to Solano, and then there are 3 marked out individual parking spaces signed for 4-hour parking before another accessible parking space. So the loading zone wouldn't be right at Solano unless we moved the accessible parking space further from the corner. And it would be across Masonic from the commercial uses that currently use it. And so those were, I think, the main cons, and it's not adjacent to any commercial uses there. If we considered moving the accessible parking space from the corner, I would remove some of the concern about having the loading zone sort of sandwiched between some other accessible uses.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how much those loading zones are being used, and if one is enough, or that's what I'm trying to understand.
Other comments?
Ken, so my head.
Commissioner Del Rosario.
Thanks. I'm supportive of staff's recommendation. I like the multiple use of curb management is a really hot topic right now, and trying to get the highest and best use of curb is important. And anytime you can get multiple uses out of curb space, preserve functions, and then also not have parking impacts for the businesses, as was mentioned in the comments, I think that's all a good thing considering what the needs are for the intersection. I think the other piece of that, why I support staff's recommendation, is the UPS trucks. Unless we can somehow reach out to UPS to have them change their meetup, either time or location, that's going to exist, and it has to probably exist somewhere. And I think this still facilitates that. I appreciate the restaurant owners' comments about the other side of the street, but that's difficult for people loading and unloading to have to cross Masonic with, I don't know how large of a delivery, and it's not just a restaurant, but it's other uses there too. So it seems like, given all the alternatives and the needs that we have, that I support staff's recommendation. I think the one thing that I'm concerned about is if there's going to be conflicting uses of the curb, if we can't exactly match the times, but between the preschool use and the loading zone use. But it's paint, and those are things that we can always manage to adjust again, and there's other alternatives that we can look at. So yeah, I'm happy to make a motion to support staff's recommendation when we get to that point.
So we have a motion put forward. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion seconded. I'm going to pause for further discussion because I haven't had a chance to speak, and just say that Mr. Kim suggested that prohibiting left turns from southbound Masonic could be another solution. I'm not in favor of that, and I think the fact that no one else mentioned it would indicate that nobody else was in favor of that either. This is the penalty for having to pass through the intersection straight and work out your way to get back is just too strong. This is a well-used intersection, and we want people to be able to turn onto Solano and access our businesses. So I'm not in support of that. I am in support of staff solution. And are there any other comments before we take a vote? Seeing none, I'll ask Mr. Freed to take roll.
Commissioner Del Rosario,
Yes.
Commissioner Graham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fong,
Yes.
Chair McCroskey.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Thanks to the public for the comments and the commissioners. And we'll move along to item number 5.2, the application for a local road safety plan grant. Staff, take it away, please.
Michelle Klaus will present this item.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all again. Let me just pull up my presentation. So I just have a short presentation for you this evening on local road safety plan grants. So I'm just going to start with a brief explanation of local road safety plans, or LRSPs. These are data-focused frameworks to systematically identify and analyze safety problems and recommend safety improvements on local roads. So they are what they sound like. It's a plan that's specific to safety on local roads. And the process is very much data-oriented. It starts with connecting with partners. So that might be, local school districts, emergency services, community groups, a variety of possibilities there. Then going to the vision and goals for the plan, collecting and analyzing a variety of data related to safety. And then the real heart of the plan is the emphasis areas. These are really just, specific subjects that we need to focus on. Problem areas could be something like nighttime crashes or pedestrian fatalities, or, any variety of things. And each of those emphasis areas will have a description of the problem, a goal, and then a variety of strategies for reaching the goal. So that's the heart of the plan. And then it finishes off with strategies for evaluation and implementation of the plan. So in terms of funding, there is non-competitive funding available from Caltrans, and it's on a first come, first served basis. It just requires a short application. And Albany qualifies for a $40,000 grant, and also has to contribute $5,000 to the whole project. So I believe it's, Caltrans would cover 90%. And it's also interesting because these types of plans are often a prerequisite for other sources of funding, state and federal funding, and specifically the Highway Safety Improvement Program, and possibly other sources of funding in the future. So getting this initial grant could help get future grants down the line. And finally, there are active transportation co-benefits. So there are ways that an LRSP would potentially contribute to working on an active transportation plan update, because a lot of the data that is in the LRSP is also needing to be updated for the ATP. So in particular, the LRSP would include collecting data on bicycle and pedestrian counts, on mapping our bicycle and pedestrian network, and updating our existing facilities map. And all of those things are sort of pieces of data that need to be updated for the ATP anyways, so it kind of lays some groundwork for that project. So the staff recommendation is to recommend that the City Council adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to submit a grant application to develop this LRSP and enter into a funding agreement of $45,000. Again, that's the $40,000 grant and then the $5,000 contributed by the city. And that is all. Any questions?
Commissioner questions? Commissioner Graham?
So Can the money just be used for staff time?
I believe it would be hiring a consultant. I don't know if it has to be used for a consultant or not. Maybe Jeff or Justin knows the answer to that.
Our intent would be to hire a consultant to do the work. Other Caltrans planning grants do allow staff time, so I would guess that's possible, but I haven't looked at that specifically for this grant.
And can staff time be used as the match?
We'd have to check on that's vary between different Caltrans grant programs, so I don't know specifically for this
We certainly would use, if we're allowed to use staff time as the match, we would certainly do that. We don't have the staff time to do this on our own, so even if we could use all of the grant, the 40,000 towards staff, we just don't have the capacity right now to do that. So, and there are consultants who are doing, a lot of people are doing these right now, and so it'd be probably much more efficient use of time to have someone who's done a handful of them already and do the same thing for us.
Yeah, I know that we're not on the comment period as of yet. My worry, it's just, $40,000 does not go super far. So I think you have to be very strategic in terms of how you are planning on using that, especially when you have to report back.
You're right, yes.
Commissioner Rosario, Del Rosario.
Thanks. Two questions. One, it sounded like from the staff report, or maybe it was the grant's description, that there's an ongoing cost to update the plan. So what would be our plans for that? Is there continuing funds that would come for this, or would we have to fold it into our operating budget to do that?
Sorry, continuing cost update are you talking about the ATP or the?
No, I thought the LRSG had an ongoing requirement to it. Is that not correct?
Not that I'm aware of. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Justin.
I don't know if there was a time limit in terms of how old. We do have requirements similar to the ATP, probably that we're supposed to update it regularly. So as far as the funding source, I think it's intended to get jurisdictions qualifying for this federal funding. I don't think it's an ongoing commitment by Caltrans to keep funding this.
Okay. And then the second question was, does it need to feed into a state highway safety plan in order for this to exist? Maybe I got that confused too, but does the LRSP need to feed into an SHSP, whether that's through the state or through Albany?
I don't think so. I think the state completed one, but I don't think it has to tie into ongoing state planning work.
Yeah, based on the description I saw, they were sort of parallel, but I don't think they really need to be closely connected.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Fong, questions?
Nope, I'm okay.
All right, and mine were covered already. So that takes us to public comment. This is the chance to raise your hand, and we'll allot 3 minutes, and we have at least one interested commenter.
Jeremiah, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I did hear you say you're announcing public comment. Although I regret to inform you, I don't know what agenda item we're on because I'm at the laundry program right now. It's just finishing up. So can you please let me know what agenda item we're on, please?
We're on
Jeremiah,
item.
we're on item 5-2 regarding local road safety grant programs.
Okay, yeah, great. Well, I could comment on that. If possibly, I know in the past I've mentioned school zones. I still have yet to been informed out of the meeting or anything about school zones within Albany. I still cannot find school zones anywhere in the municipal code book, yet I hear from this council repeatedly that school zones have been implemented. And I just don't think so. But I think school zones would be a great thing. It's safety. I mean, there's hardly any speed bumps around any of our schools. And the speed limit around all of our schools are 25 miles an hour. To me, it just doesn't make common sense. I mean, how could you have cars as mile an hour set so high at 25 when you got little kids trying to go to school and loading and drop off times? I mean, for me, I would just simply suggest 15 miles an hour around our schools and things like that. So if you want to do safety around our streets, I think these bulb outs and these circles in the streets are making traffic go slower. But I really think the best impact we can have on our community is get school zones in our municipal code book and have it be a law, because there's double fines within school zones. The police can give double fines within school zones. I mean, every other city in the Bay Area I know has school zones in the municipal code book. And I'm just looking forward to Albany finally getting school zones someday in the municipal code book. And I think that would keep our schools safe. And then we can apply for school zone grants from the state. And also, I just want to throw it out there one more time. The Pedestrian Safety Act, I believe it was 2010 when it came out. And I thought I was the happiest person. But if we can just investigate some more of the Pedestrian Safety Act, because that's federally what our country is doing, is pedestrian safety and safety. So keep up the good work, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
All right. Let's bring it back to the commission for additional questions and comments. Not seeing anybody leaping into the fray. Commissioner Del Rosario.
I think there were concerns raised about the amount of money. Sounds like the matching grant is, I guess, 11%, which is, for this dollar amount, is fairly low. So maybe the risk is low, but we'd have to be really mindful of that. And I think as much as maybe we can tie this to active transportation plan or some other efforts to get economies of scales, would be helpful. The other piece of it is you're right that there isn't a mandated requirement to update the LRSP, but there is, I think there's somewhere in the language in the program that it should be updated periodically, and probably it should be updated along the same timeline that we would want to update the active transportation plan, just given that safety measures for local roads are ever evolving. And so we should try to implement those new technologies. And then are there different goals that we want to try to achieve that we would want to change, say, every 5 years? So I think if we go for this, there's the two pieces of making sure that we can actually complete the initial plan, and then make sure that we can update it on a regular basis.
Great. Additional comments? Commissioner Grant.
Yeah, I'll just say I agree with that, and will reiterate that I do think that we need to be strategic with how there seems to be flexibility in terms of what the funds are used for. I do agree. I think we need to be strategic in not trying to do everything with it, and figure out a very sort of deliverable scope of work that can be done that will support the future update of the ATP. So, but I'll be in support of it.
Commissioner Fong?
Yeah, I agree with what Commissioner Graham said, that I like the idea of it being as tangible as possible. Seems like a good opportunity to apply. So definitely supportive of the effort.
Great. And for me, I'm supportive. I'm interested in what kind of goals we can incorporate. I like the basic safety goals and reduction of injury, reduction of crashes. I'm sorry, accident crashes. Still having trouble with that one. But I'm also interested in whether we want to try and start setting up some metrics around increased active transportation as part of advancing and achieving our goals for the Climate Action Plan, for the ATP, to go beyond just keeping the same traffic mix to how do we get more active transportation users in our network. And for that, it's not just the safety, the on the ground actual safety, but it's a perceived safety. And I think we should push a little, obviously within the bounds of the grant, but to start thinking in those terms as we look towards the next ATP, because we have some pretty big goals for reducing carbon output, and we need to think about how we're going to get there. And in order to increase active transportation, you have to get people thinking that it's safe. And there are many ways to do that, including hardscape and other ways. So I just want to plant that seed. Obviously, we're not deciding the metrics tonight. Any last comments from the commission? Commissioner Del Rosario.
Yeah, good comments, Ken. I agree about pushing the envelope and tying local road safety to active transportation and walking, cycling, taking transit. I think those are a really good, strong link there that can really progress us in the same direction to get to our greenhouse gas emission reductions goal. The only I'm happy to put a motion to recommend staff bring this to council for a resolution to apply for the grant. And I also ask that, and I assume this will happen, that staff comes back with the scope of work for the commission to review and approve.
Great, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Fong seconds. Any last discussion? Mr. Freed, could you take roll for a vote?
Commissioner Del Rosario,
Yes.
Commissioner Fong,
Yes.
Commissioner Graham.
Yes.
And Chair McCroskey.
Yes.
Motion carries.
F
Great.
actually comes before G.
It's true. I was doing vice chair and chair.
Oh, I see.
We're on Zoom. Get a little latitude. Thank you, Commission and staff, for bringing this to us, and look forward to hopefully seeing this come through on the work side. So that closes item number 5.2. We move on to item number 5.3, an update on the Pavement Management Program.
Allison Creo will present this item.
Actually, I got a quick introduction before Allison takes over. So you've all heard from Allison, I think, a couple of times on past projects, but tonight she's going to be speaking in sort of a new capacity. She is, as you know, Robert Gonzalez left the city for another position, and Allison has graciously stepped up and is our new CIP manager. So she has taken on a large role, and she's presenting the pavement plan, more so, not so much details of the plan itself, but how we want to execute the remaining phases and how we think we can move this along quickly through the commission. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Allison.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. Big shoes to fill with the people who have been here before me. So I'll do my best here. So let me just start by sharing my screen. So I'm going to briefly go through a couple of different things. But first and foremost, kind of go through how we get here to a CIP program, how we got to the CIP project, specifically the 2-year CIP project, the project phases, including Marin, which has previously been presented, our current schedule for the 2-year program, and focusing on the next phase, what we're calling phase 2, the transportation features that we're seeing moving forward, and kind of generally the Albany design preferences to bring forth to you, and so we can talk through and hopefully give good design guidance to our designers so they can just take it and run and continue moving forward in this 2-year plan. And then just kind of wrapping up with what we've actually accomplished in the last few years and next steps for the next round of pavement management. So with that, I'll just start my presentation. So just an overview of the program, pavement program. Some of you have been here for some of the other presentations, so bear with me as I go through some of probably what's already been covered in great detail. But generally, we're trying.
Allison, sorry, should we be seeing your presentation?
You are not seeing my presentation? That's not good. Okay, let me try to share my screen again. Are you seeing it now?
It's coming. Something is coming. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I apologize for that.
No problem.
So, yes, here we go. So just briefly, the main metric that we're looking at is the PCI score in terms of how we're doing in this pavement management program. This covers, it's going through the strategy for pavement management. It covers a couple of, or 4 different main methods. We have routine maintenance, which covers potholing, crack filling, those kinds of things that are done on a regular basis. We have more preventative maintenance, such as slurry seals and other seal treatments or microsurfacing. And we have rehabilitation. That's something like Marin, where we're going to do a grind and pave, or over some kind of more major overlay. And finally, reconstruction. This is the most expensive one, and we do want to try to keep our pavement in good enough condition that we don't have to do reconstruction. Unfortunately, sometimes there's deferred maintenance that happens, or just the usage of the roads is greater than what the road can take, and we have to do, instead of routine maintenance, we have to go down the list and do more expensive treatments. I think one of the common refrains is that it's the right road at the right treatment, right time, and for the right price. And so these are things that we look at in coming up with how best to go about this pavement management program. The good news is it looks like in the last PTAP report, PTAP being the pavement treatment assessment plan. I'm sorry, I might have gotten that wrong. But the latest condition assessment that was performed, our PCI score, pavement condition index score, went up by 3 points. So I think that's showing that we've actually been doing some work here and trying to improve things. But we do want to keep moving forward on this and improving further. General overview of the CIP process, how we get to the 2-year program where we are today. So we have a lot of kind of parallel goals and considerations. We're looking at local priorities, such as the bike route maintenance priorities. We're looking at other CIP projects, such as Masonic, Solano Complete Streets, and we're looking at ATP improvements, amongst other things. We're also coordinating with our fellow utility owners, such as East Bay Mud and PG&E, to tie our pavement rehabilitation project specifically, so that we're not coming in and they have to come in within a couple years and tear up our pavement. We really want to be following them so that we have good condition roads that stay in a good condition for as long as possible. Included in those utilities are sewer work. So over the last 4 to 5 years, there's been a significant increase in the amount of sewer works that's performed around the city. And there's been a lot of focus on it because it's a consent decree. And we're we want to do the same with the pavement now, and really kind of increase the amount of paving that we're doing so that we can increase our PCI score, our metric. And now that sewer's in a good condition, we're kind of we are able now to move forward on a lot of blocks that were previously planned for sewer work. So we'll be coming back in the future with additional blocks. And then finally, the final consideration is kind of the street saver and funding scenario. So we're looking at how best to go about rehabilitating, applying preventative maintenance treatments, and basically getting the most bang for our buck. There's periodic updates on our condition assessments that allow us to see both what needs to be performed as well as hopefully in the future how well our previous treatments, how successful our previous treatments have been. The second, so that leads us to a candidate list of streets, and this is where I think we start talking to in greater detail with this commission about which ones are we going to be proposing as the next round of pavement rehabilitation projects. Part of the phase that we're currently in, where we're going through design, is we're also wanting to make sure that we're phasing in a way where treatment cycles are aggregated, so that meaning that the type of treatment and the location of projects are in set up in a way that it's cost effective for the design and construction. And then from there, we really end up with our pavement CIP project, Marin being the current phase that's in design, and moving into the other two phases, which I'll be covering next. So this is, as we said, the 2-year locations. In green is Marin. In yellow is our proposal for the next phase. These are primarily north-south streets, more residential streets. And in yellow are our phase 3. These are ones where we do want to come back to this commission in the future before we do design kickoff to go through some planning considerations, because there's either ATP known kind of transportation desires on these streets, or other considerations that we do want to vet out first before we give design guidance to CSGR designers, so that we can keep them moving on design while being able to vet out everything here. So just kind of briefly covering the streets. Phase 2, Jackson, Cornell, Keynes, Evelyn, Masonic, Carmel, two streets on Carmel. And phase 3, this is the ones that we're going to be coming back to you at a future meeting to discuss kind of proposals for how we want to go through with the project and discuss any kind of additional concerns. Here is, presented here is kind of our overall pavement schedule for the CIP project. As you can see, there's on the very left-hand side, that's phase 1 Marin paving. We've gone to this commission 2 times to discuss kind of project design guidance and make sure that we're giving clear direction to our designers. We do plan to come back at a future date, at least once, if not twice, to make sure that we're getting through this in a way that is, transparent and collaborative. The current phase that we really want to move forward on in being able to give clear design guidance is phase 2 in yellow. So for that one, we're thinking these are fairly, straightforward north-south streets with transportation elements which are either described in the ATP or have existing designs that for striping that we think we can move forward on. And meanwhile, we're going to kick off a kind of a planning phase for the phase 3. There's lots of phases, but kick off some planning discussions for phase 3, and these are the ones where we anticipate a bit more discussion being needed. Some of the drivers on this schedule, outside of just our desire to continue improving the PCI score, we have some timely use of funds requirements for transportation funding. So we do want to keep pushing these projects out so that we meet that timely use of funding requirement. We also have continued coordination with sewer and utility work. I'm sure everyone's aware it's quite a bit of East Bay mud work going on along both the Washington corridor and now the Cornell corridor. So as part of this second phase, for example, we do want to pave Cornell and not extend out our design phase significantly for the phase 2, so that we can catch the end of the East Bay mud work and really move in and get brand new pavement in as soon as possible. And then just, we've spoken about this briefly before, but we do want to also continue our curb ramp improvements in consideration of the ADA settlement agreement. So we're definitely working hard to keep these projects coming. Specifically, in this case, we would like to get comments and give design guidance for phase 2. Let's see. So following that, just wanted to briefly go over some of the transportation features we're seeing in this phase 2 of the CIP project, along with some Albany design preferences, which I'll speak to next. Generally, we're looking at making ADA curb ramp improvements. We're looking at making sure that in locations we're putting in 444 crosswalks, we're putting in stop bars, and we're restriping. We're making sure that we're putting in brand new striping, and a lot of these streets really do need striping improvements, so it's visible for users of the road. Specifically for phase 2 on Jackson Street, there's a design for a bicycle boulevard, which has already been vetted through, and so we're going to be implementing that bicycle boulevard design on the first block, Washington to Castro. On Keynes Avenue, extending the bike boulevard. This is the two-way portion of Keynes Street, or Keynes Avenue, where we're going to be doing, coming off of Marin, extends this this bicycle path out with a bicycle boulevard. On Masonic, we're going to be restriping the existing sharrows between Solano and Portland. The intersections have already they're in construction with Washington Avenue, or they'll soon be improved with the Masonic intersection work. So we're primarily tackling the blocks in between. And then finally on Carmel Avenue, there's a traffic calming request on Washington for a new crosswalk, and we're taking a look at the feasibility of that. It requires some curb ramp and drainage work that was evaluated previously, and I think it makes the most sense to bring it into this project. And then as a kind of new in this role, staff, just want to make sure that I understand the Albany design preferences, and that if there's any comments on them, we can discuss it before the design guidance is given to our designers. So I think the preference is directional ramps perpendicular to the roadway at crossings. 3 examples are shown to the right. Type A, which is the typical one you see when there's enough sidewalk width. Caltrans type A with merged flares is the sidewalks narrow. And then finally, type C modified. This is most recently seen on Washington Avenue, but these tend to work well in situations where our streets are getting very narrow and the type A ramps no longer fit. Specifically for the ramps, design guidance that we've received in the past include 1 foot radius, rounded curb radius at all curbs, and return curbs to make sure that there's no corner sticking out. We're looking to avoid vertical concrete wedges between ramps. This was a previous discussion item, I believe. We're looking for high friction detectable domes, which are now Caltrans standard. I think there's some older domes prior to Caltrans updates on requirements that were installed around the state, and the newer ones have high friction requirements that we've made sure are in the projects. Where we are putting in valley gutters, we're bringing the drainage away from the pedestrian path of travel, and we're avoiding returning curbs encroaching into the path of travel where possible. And if there's anything additional or if I misunderstood anything, please let me know. Lastly, I just kind of want to kind of present our 2-year locations and overlay that with kind of our prior work, because we've done quite a bit of work in the last few years, and I really wanted to both celebrate kind of what we've accomplished and say that we're trying to keep this going. So the purple here is showing where previous either rehabilitation or other kinds of preventative maintenance work was performed. So you can see there's quite a bit done, and we do understand there's been quite a lot of disturbance with this work for the community, and to thank the community for their patience as these projects are constructed. It's, especially with COVID, it's not easy. With people at home more, it's a lot of visible and audible disturbance to people who are living in the neighborhood. And it's not just us. There's a lot of utility work, but this is work that's been, unfortunately deferred for a long time, and it really needs to be done. And we're trying our best to come in afterwards and make sure that's in good condition. Looking forward, we're in the process of the next round of condition assessment. So we'll be coming back at a future date to report on that in conjunction with some of the other considerations that I spoke to earlier, to make sure that we have a candidate list of streets that we can work through and find a good next 2-year cycle of CIP projects. Meanwhile, we're continuing to look at other streets, evaluating other streets with an eye toward potholing and routine and preventative maintenance projects. Again, we want to thank the Commission and the public for their support as we've carried out these large CIP projects. And just a heartfelt thank you. And with that, that's really the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Carrillo. Welcome to the position, and thank you for your continued work and your presentation. I'd like to request that this gets added to the archive agenda materials for this meeting. Mr. Freed will help with that, and that way we can go back and look at it again. I'd like to open up to commission questions. Commissioner Del Rosario.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the presentation and welcome. That was a very thorough explanation of our pavement program. So I was looking through Alameda County Transportation Commission packet, just the most recent one. So I think there's a meeting today, and they talked about their direct local distribution funds. So that's Measure B, Measure BB, and VRF. And there's of course a portion of that that is allocated towards pavement treatment and repaving for roads. So what I noticed there is that our PCI, they had actually had 57. So maybe that's the 3 points you were talking about that we've moved up. But we're second to lowest, I think, in the county. There's a few cities there: Berkeley, San Leandro, and I think Oakland was the lowest. So a two-part question for this. One, and I don't know a whole lot about pavement and pavement management and funding, but is it because why is that? Is that because other cities are contributing other local dollars towards maybe it's local taxes or something like that towards roadway pavements that we and Berkeley and Oakland are not? And then the second question is, what would our PCI be after phase 2?
Maybe I'll jump into that. I don't think Allison has the same history. So my sense of how we got into this condition is more a function of us not executing projects year over year. I think what I want to do is get to a point where we are with the sewer now, where we are meeting our requirements for pushing out projects. So as we're constructing the first project, we're designing next year's project, and so it's constantly rolling out. And so I think it's more of us not executing as efficiently as we can. As far as where we're going with PCI, I believe we at the last PTAP round, which fed into the last CIP, we're budgeting about $2 million a year of reinvestment into the roads. And over, I think that was a 10-year period that showed us growing up to close to 70, which is, you know, substantially better than we are now. But that's why it's important that we're doing the PTAPs regularly, and we're kicking off the new PTAP, which will then, you know, take into account the work we have done and whether we're on that track or not, and then we can update our CIP going forward. But I think the best thing is to invest $2 million a year into our streets year over year and just keep that rolling.
So we don't necessarily do that. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the cities all get some sort of allocation for local roads maintenance, and we're no different. And the cities aren't necessarily plugging in other dollars to get, you know, a PCI of like 80 or whatever it is in, you know, like Dublin or something. So it's more management and allocation of dollars. We allocate our dollars.
Yes. So I think in addition to the ACTC, you know, BBB and so forth, we also have a local measure. It's called Measure F, which is street and storm drain. So it's specifically for reinvesting into the streets and storm drains. And so, you know, we're leveraging both those sources. I think in some ways we have more flexibility with the ACTC money to fund other things, whereas the local measure is very specifically for upgrading streets.
Got it.
Okay. So it's sort of a blend of all that funding, and I try to mesh other needs of other projects that are going on that might be more appropriately funded with one source versus another.
Got it. And so do you think there's more of that happening in other cities? Hard to answer.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think every city has its own kind of things they do well and things that maybe they weren't doing well. I think one of our issues is we have in the last I'd say 4 or 5 years done a tremendous amount of sewer work. And I think that was a big sort of game of Tetris to try to figure out what streets we wouldn't be digging up in the next, you know, we're under a really set framework for our consent decree to do a mile of sewer essentially every year. And, you know, if you plan out that over a 5-year period, it's hard. And then you overlay East Bay mud and PG&E. It's hard to find a street that you can pave that's not going to be dug up in the next 5 years.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. That leads me to my next question about utility companies. So what's the obligation for utility companies? I think Washington is probably one of the examples that we're all familiar with, where, you know, it's great that it's paved, but before that, it's just a patchwork because of the utility companies. And so, you know, what I see, whether riding a bike or driving, those are the roughest roads are the ones that get utility replacements. And so how does that fall into the equation, and what accountability or responsibility do they have versus what the city has?
So I think there's two parts of that. One, there's a 5-year moratorium on streets if digging in streets if you newly paved streets. So there's that as a piece. But I think there's also a piece that maybe we hadn't been so good with in the past, and that's really tracking other utility companies and doing work here. And I think Public Works has taken a larger role in issuing encroachment permits and following up with. So it's a combination of, we have a moratorium and that means don't dig unless there's really a line break or something like that. The other thing is being on top of utility companies when they do work in here to follow up and make sure that they restore trenches correctly, and so that we do get long-term performance. Because there's some horrible trenches around here.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, and welcome back, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. We're very happy to be back.
Yes, good to have you back. Other commission questions? Commissioner Grant.
I just have an educational question. When you do the measuring that the TTAP or whatever that is it is it an assessment we do ourselves, or we have someone come in and do that assessment for us?
So MTC actually assists with that. They provide a grant we match a certain amount, and we bring on consultants who do that. They drive around and assess the roads. I believe this is on a biannual. For the city of Albany specifically, for our reporting, it's a biannual assessment. MTC, I think, has yearly yearly scores that they publish, and I think they're in the midst of doing that right now.
Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Fong, any questions?
Yeah, I guess just in terms of choosing the streets, in terms of the criteria you mentioned, kind of as it fits in with the active transportation plan, also the level of, I guess, quality of the streets. Do you also consider like the usage of the streets as well? Is that another criteria, or is it just mainly around the plans that we have?
Yeah, Mark may be able to answer more, but I'll try my best to start.
Actually, I could probably take this. So what in the last update to the CIP, we did a lot of work on this, because what we wanted to do is come up with an approach that sort of had an equitable distribution of funding across all usage classes. And so we actually even developed a class of street that was a residential street that's used as a bike boulevard that might get a different treatment than just a traditional residential street. So the idea was that we wanted to bring up each asset class sort of along, together, so that, we're not over investing in one, and so we're kind of spreading it across the entire city. And then, one of the things also, it's we want to invest to keep the good streets good. So in some ways it's, if a street has deteriorated to a really bad, it's better to actually take our money and spend it on a street that's still good and keep it in a good level, otherwise, if you just wait till they, all get to the failed level, well, then we're just going to have failed streets and with a handful of good streets. So it's just a really kind of like I said, a Tetris puzzle that you try to put together to come up with something that works.
So just to follow up on that, so with the different phases, those are all for like a more complete rehabilitation. That's not including the more routine maintenance types of repairs.
Right. So sort of with this CIP work, we are trying to do, and this is something that last year was the first year we did this, is do 2 rounds of potholing throughout the city. And this is where we actually hire a contractor, and we're targeting about $100,000 of spend to do potholes. And the idea is to do one sort of going into the winter season and coming out of the winter season, so that, you kind of take care of your problems going in, and whatever problems emerge out of the winter season, you can take care of those as well.
plus the car wash.
Yes.
Great. Any other commissioner questions? Seeing none, I'm going to turn it over to public comment. Looks like we have at least one person interested in public comment. Mr. Vaughn, please.
Okay, Jeremiah, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So the temporary or the potholes you're referring to, I call Caltrans all the time on the freeway. And they always ask me if I'm requesting a temporary or a permanent. And at first I was requesting temporary, and what they do is they just go out and fill the pothole. And then it just 2 months later, that asphalt just is out of the pothole and it's just a mess. So it doesn't really get fixed. So then I started requesting permanent, and then they go cut out a big square around the pothole and pave it. And that's more permanent. That seems to work really well. So, I mean, you guys patch all these potholes with that quick set, ready asphalt in a 5-gallon bucket. You know, it's only going to last so long. So these temporary fixes, we're just kind of spend money over and over. Also, so I suggest permanent with these potholes. Also, you know, we had a lot of construction going on in the city recently, and there was zero safety regulations. We have construction going on Solano, and I don't know who the city is hiring these contractors, but these contractors were literally cussing me out, calling me names. And I mean, these guys, I mean, I don't know, they just got in the country or they don't speak English or something. And so I think we're just giving money to these contractors and they're hiring the cheapest labor. I don't even, it's supposed to be a prevailing wage job, but I don't even know if they're getting their prevailing wage. You know, there's no checks and balances. I've got police reports with Albany Police. You know, these construction workers, they're not really nice people to our community. And I've heard a lot of complaints, not just myself, from these construction workers, you know, and the safety is terrible. They do this construction and they leave at the end of the day, and they leave trash and all this stuff, soda cans, water bottles all over, you know, like they don't care, you know, right on the heart of our community, Solano. And then you got pedestrians having to walk around into the street and almost get hit by a bus on Solano. Zero safety. You know, I had to call the transportation guy over and over to come out, but apparently he doesn't work for us anymore. He moved somewhere else. I don't know. So I suggest when we hire these contractors, we gotta have a policy to where they clean up after themselves, and pedestrian safety is number one. Because when you're doing a sidewalk, where are the people gonna go? Around and into the street. And even if you say closed sidewalk, I saw people on Solano, they still walk right through it. So my suggestion was create another lane, create a little pedestrian thing with some cones and some ballers. And I did that one time in front of my office, and it worked great. And it was an easy solution and it worked great. But then after that, they never did it again. So we got to keep these construction sites safe when they're operating on our streets. So pedestrian safety is number one when we do this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. If anybody else is interested in making a comment on this item, now's the time to raise your hand. Seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the commission. And Commissioner Del Rosario has already raised his hand.
Thanks. So I thought you were asking about commission. I think two comments. One is the need to get the ATP and now the LRSP done, and then how that feeds into the pavement plan. And so it seems like you have all of these plans that have to keep advancing and being revised together. So I hope we have that type of planning cycle in mind to develop these plans, because they're all so related. And anytime you do repaving, that's your chance to change striping or put in other safety features. I know we had some discussions in the past about trying to better weight PCI towards the use of the roadway in addition to what MTC has. I don't know if that's going to get there anywhere, and I think that's actually a discussion of MTC, but I think something that we should continue to push for. I'm sure Councilmember Jordan would be pushing for that as well. And then just on the public comment, because a construction worker doesn't speak English doesn't mean that they're bad workers. So I didn't appreciate that comment.
Thank you. Other commissioner comments, questions, follow-up? Let me say that I have mostly had good experiences with contractors in Albany, and they've been fairly responsive. Sorry if any of them haven't been, and I'm sure that the Public Works Department is always striving to get them to meet their commitments and to treat our community the best as possible. So I hope that the commenter's observations were the anomaly rather than the regular. And that's certainly my experience. Are there other commissioner comments or questions? Seeing none immediately, I will launch in and take a turn. And again, thank you for the presentation, Ms. Carrillo. I think you actually captured fairly well the preferences that have been established over time. And I caught most of what you said. I think one of the things you said that wasn't on the sheet was something about the radius of curbs, and I wasn't sure if you said that also applied to the rear retaining walls that often appear. But I know Mark is clear on that, so. And I would add that those need to be outside the sidewalk path. Right, Mark. Thank you, Mark. And just to add one further step of refinement, in general, it's preferred to have the curb ramps where it's possible be in the line of travel. Okay, great. Just want to put that out there as an additional refinement. And I guess the only other thing was, I think we've only had one meeting where we talked extensively about, I think it was your B example with the sort of the dome in the middle between the two. And we were having a lot of trouble figuring out what we really wanted to do with that. So that there may be room for refinement there, or a slight preference to just eliminate that and go flat, like the third example, so that there isn't an impediment for walking in general. And also, in addition to the distribution you talked about with uses, I think the street paving plan does a pretty good job of distributing over the geography of Albany. And I know that's another thing you take into consideration. So that's looking pretty good. That's it for me. Other commissioner comments? Commissioner Graham.
I'll just say that I second the comments that have already been made, and would just, yes, encourage us to figure out what we're going to be doing on the ATP before we go down that third level of design and planning for, or of design for that third tranche of projects. So, and thank you for the presentation.
Commissioner Fong, anything from you?
Nope. I thought it was a good presentation. Appreciate that.
So we've provided comments, which was our charge for this item. If there are no further comments, I'd like to thank staff again and close item 5.3.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Hope to see you back soon.
You'll see me.
Great. So that moves us on to item number 6, announcements from staff and committee members, commission members, and reports and updates of status of previous agenda items. we'll start with item 6.1. And is that you, Mr. Freed?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The 6.1 and 6.2 are both just sharing announcements essentially from other agencies. Caltrans and the Bay Area Toll Authority are soliciting feedback via an online survey for the bicycle and pedestrian path on the upper deck of the Richmond San Rafael Bridge. So the link to that survey is available from the agenda packet.
But then once you got to the figure.
Let me mute our other staff.
Thank you.
Item 6-2, similarly, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission has announced they're recruiting applicants for their Policy Advisory Council, which is region-wide advisory council, has representation geographically as well as by, I think, different stakeholder group kind of representation. So they're soliciting applications. The other announcement I had was that the traffic calming policy update was approved at City Council this past Monday. With one change, there was the addition of language noting that speed treatments are not intended to punish motorists traveling at or below the speed limit. So just added to the design criteria essentially for that. But that has been approved. That's my announcements.
Any commissioner announcements? Okay, let's move on to item number 7, future agenda items. Do we have any commissioner requests for future agenda items? Commissioner Fong.
Yeah, I'd like to request that we consider how to retain the outdoor dining measures that we've done during COVID and how we can consider if we can make those permanent after the end of the pandemic. That's I think that's adding a lot to our community, definitely good for our businesses. And I think it's also in line with all of the active transportation plan and other plans that we have in the city.
It was my understanding from staff at our last meeting that we need to wait till the fall when the state will figure out more of what it's doing, and that we'll be able to hopefully build on their efforts. And that's definitely on the horizon.
Great, that'd be good. I think maybe Berkeley might have done something recently on this too, so I can follow up with staff. Be great to consider as soon as we can. So I appreciate that.
Okay. Staff, mentions of future agenda items?
So another council action on Monday was finalizing the work plan template. So we will bring you next month, hopefully the final draft work plan for your recommendation to council, which means it probably wouldn't go to council till after the August recess, just scheduling wise. We also have upcoming pavement management items as Allison outlined, and we'll be looking to, assuming the city council approves the application for a local road safety plan, working on drafting a RFP for your review on that.
Yeah, and maybe we'll see an Ocean View Buchanan driveway plan at some point. I know they plan to open school in the fall. Great. So that's item number 7. Our next meeting is Thursday, July 22nd at 7 p.m. Are we presuming that's going to be a virtual Zoom meeting?
Almost certainly will be a Zoom meeting, but probably beginning in September, we'll go to some sort of modified in-person and hybrid, which is still a little bit of a work in progress for us, how exactly we're going to do it. But, we're evolving now.
Great. Well, I'll say that this has been the ability to participate from anywhere has been valuable to me at least a couple times, including now where I'm appearing to you from the breakfast room at my Eugene motel. I'd share the bananas, but I can't get them to. So thank you, staff and commissioners, for your time. And Commissioner Graham, we're at an hour and 36 minutes. Yeah, okay.
Good work, everyone.
Sometimes we can do it, but it unfortunately is rare.
What am I going to do with all this extra time?
I'm sure you'll think of something. So thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you next month, and enjoy your summer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Steph.
Good night.